Welcome to People in Transition, the show where we explore how to move through life's big changes with purpose, courage, and creativity. I'm your host, Bob Gerst, and today I'm thrilled to welcome someone who truly embodies what it means to thrive in times of transition, Susan Hensley. Susan is a transformational coach, speaker, and author who helps people navigate life shifts with joy, resilience, and a healthy dose of curiosity. With decades of experience as a corporate executive, leadership coach, and even a broadcast journalist, she brings a unique blend of insight, creativity, and global perspective to her work. She's lived and worked all over the world, from Hong Kong to London to Austin. And through her coaching and workshops, she helps people unlock their inner wisdom and rediscover their authentic selves. One of her most powerful tools, art journaling, a creative practice that combines reflection, mindfulness, and self-expression to help people process change and build emotional strength. Today, we'll explore how art journaling can help us embrace transitions, quiet that inner critic, and tap into creativity as a form of healing and resilience. Susan, welcome to People in Transition. I'm so glad you're here with us.
Oh, Bob, thank you for having me. I'm super happy to be here too. It feels like exactly how I spend my time is helping people in transition. So it's a perfect match.
Susan, let's jump right in. You work with so many professionals who've been laid off. What are the most common emotional reactions that you see during those first few weeks after the notification?
Sure. It's very common to be in shock, to be angry, sad, to feel like the wind has been taken out of your sails, your life has turned upside down. Sometimes people see it coming. You can be in an organization where there have been rounds of layoffs, and so you've been sort of girding yourself for it. And it can even feel in a strange way, if you're in one of those situations, like an odd relief when it's a complete surprise, when you had no idea, and maybe it's a single individual job or a massive thing. That's really where you get a lot of the surprise. I mean, losing a job is one of the key stressors in our life. When they do the models of big stressors, death of a partner, loss of a job, big move. And so it really rocks a person's foundation. And it's important to take some time to honor that.
Let's talk about that a little bit. How can someone honor the loss of their role, especially when they loved or they were really had their identity tied closely to it? And what I think you want them to not do is not to get stuck in grief or resentment.
Well, you're absolutely right. At some point, we need to move on through each stage. But I really work with clients, and I'll tell you about a particular person I'm working with right now that's so interesting. I want to make the bigger point first. You have to go through the stage. So she is an individual, very, very talented, well thought of, high level position, and the elimination of her position came as a complete shock. So, primary breadwinner, et cetera. So for the first couple of weeks, there's just a lot of grief and people reaching out, which feels really good, saying, what she meant, and almost like a funeral, if you think about it. And that's a really important process to allow the grief, the anger, the whatever it is to come through and not to try and push it down and not to try and minimize what that feels like. The challenge I see people have is, say that goes on in the first days or week, there's a real desire for it to be over. Like, I've done that, I'm ready to go. And that was one of my first meetings with this individual. It's like, yeah, been there, done that, we're ready. And I always like to, when I'm working with a client, one of my coaching certifications is about transitional intelligence. And it's really important in working with someone to see what other transitions they may have going on in their life. Because there's really six key types of transitions we all face, right? We're talking for purposes of our conversation today about a professional transition, very specifically the loss of a job. But sometimes the loss of a job doesn't come in a vacuum. It can come with something else going on in our lives, right? Our lives aren't separate. There may be some psychological transition. There may be the start of a relationship, the end of a relationship. The loss of the job may involve needing to move physically. So you could have a physical transition. So I like to, when I work with clients, just check to see how many transitions we're actually working with. Because if as a coach we don't have a good idea of what's going on in another person's life and to go through this transitional assessment, it's really important because there can be several other things. And when you have two or three transitions, the joke is that's a whole life quake. Someone will say it feels like their life is being flushed down a toilet versus say just one transition. So I also like to just take a pause when I start to work with someone and say, okay, let's look up. Right now, we're very, very focused on the job and getting the next job and wanting to be in the new. However, if we move too fast in this, you can be in patterns that repeat. You can end up in a job that doesn't fit. You can end up really bearing and not dealing with emotions or situations that come back around. So there's real importance in the pause. So back to this individual I was telling you about. We first started working about 2 weeks into it and very focused, very driven, very, very high achieving person. It's like, okay, I'm through that. I'm ready. I've actually had people start to contact me and it's like, okay. And I do the transition assessment. There aren't other big transitions, things are going pretty well. But this being a main breadwinner with a young family, important to get a new job. So we start checking in and doing the work in exploration. And what comes up a couple weeks later, probably 3 sessions into this, is this go-getter, this absolutely organized, high energy person is saying, I'm drained. I have no energy for this. When I look at updating my resume or the networking calls or things I've set up, I can't do it. And that's where we realized there was the hope, if you will, that the grieving process was done. And we did some work to uncover what was happening. And this person had been at the organization about 15 years and really felt attached to it, a lot of close relationships. And it felt like a trust had been broken, right? And it was like, didn't want to even engage because if you've been in a relationship, if you will, where you've been dumped or broken up with, because that's what this feels like, the willingness to trust is a big deal. So we had to work on what is this next stage? It may not be another 10 or 15 year place. It may be, jokingly referring to in the language of relationships, a rebound relationship, but a relationship, a job with real intention to build new skills. So it's really important to see how that grief stage keeps coming back. And as humans, we want to get through it as quickly as possible because it's so painful, but it can really surprise us. And you can get stuck there if you don't have someone sort of helping you through it.
Susan, I know that each person is going to be different, but do you have some kind of range of how long that grief stage may last? And when do you go past that line that you really do need to have a professional like you or someone else helping them through that?
So, I mean, you said it, Bob. It's different for everyone. And when we look at the stages of a transition, right, there's the ending, which is what we're talking about right now. There's a messy middle, and then there's a new beginning. And as humans, we're each more comfortable in certain parts. We just innately have either more skill over time or it fits our personality more, and we struggle. And so in working with a person, I would say you're wanting to check in on a number of fronts. Physically, how are you doing? How's your body feeling? Are you able to sleep? Are you able to eat? Are you able to focus? Time is really tricky because it's individual. It's also, being very, very practical, money, right? The loss of a job, and I think that can really drive is what is a person's personal financial situation. So even though emotionally you may not be through it, the pace at which a person needs to try and re-engage in some way. And sometimes I look at what are the baby steps to create income that don't have to be the next full thing to give yourself time to make good decisions.
You mentioned that messy middle as a stage in the transition. What does that look like after a layoff, and why is it so uncomfortable, especially for those high achievers?
Yeah. Well, it's uncomfortable because there isn't necessarily an end in sight. There isn't even a complete goal, right? People will go out and start looking at jobs, sending out resumes, things will sound good. And so you're starting to envision what you want, but you're taking sideways steps. I also really like to work with people because it helps with the ending. And what was it you really liked about the job? Not the specific things, but was it the hours? Was it the work environment? Was it the type of work, alone work, collaborative work, work with your hands, physical work, outside, inside, to try and get really clear what you liked. And then I like to do an exercise and do a lot of this with sticky notes via Zoom of what were the things that you complained about routinely, right? What were the things that if you could get rid of in that other job, you would? And so we try and make a really good list of the things that gave you energy, that you really liked and appreciate and legitimately miss, and the things that if you can avoid in a new role that don't bring out the best of you. And where that helps in the messy middle is as a person's trying to figure out what fits. And, in the way we send out resumes now, it can just feel, and I've watched a number of clients do this. There was a client of mine probably 2 years ago had been laid off and was absolutely qualified for a number of jobs. Was working in the manufacturing sector and nothing, crickets. It was really interesting. And we went back to the likes and dislikes that he had done. And there was a lot of pressure just to find a job. So he's just sending out resumes, networking, calling people. And what really needed to happen, because it wasn't aligned and he's very happy in a role now, is he took a different step really into training in a manufacturing environment versus, say, being an ops pure leader again. And I think sometimes in our hurry to just get the next thing, we can be really surprised when it looks like that's what we should get. I sometimes joke that I think the universe is saving you in this messy middle. And it's a good chance to be able to take what can feel like a sideways step, even a step backwards, to maybe just adjust your professional identity. Some people want to do something totally new and will get a certification and really look at going another way and do some part-time work while they make that, if you will, professional transition.
So what I'm hearing you say is that maybe the day after you find out your position has been eliminated, it's not time to get started in that search for the next role, but actually do some reflection and maybe spend some time in reinventing yourself before you go down that path. Am I hearing
Uh,
you correctly?
oh my gosh, yes, you're absolutely hearing me correctly. If a person can, right, I want to be really practical because different people are in different situations. If you can take some time to do the inner work, right? Feel things, you try and get out in nature, try and get your sleeping, eating. If you're a person who activity gives you calmness, I would even argue you can update resumes, you can do things. I wouldn't start applying, right? I sometimes would take actions and read things, but not like leave it all in a draft mode as you do the clarification work, because it's really important in going through that ending phase that I like to have clients use some rituals and reflections and mourn it just like you would the passing of a close friend, a partner, depending on how long you've been there. You have had a relationship with this workplace and the people at the work. And how do you honor that? Then, when you head into that messy middle, we're really hoping to head into it with greater awareness of things you want to see in your next role, things you want to learn and grow, things you can bring to it that you want to use more of. And perhaps as you're going through the interviews, situations you want to avoid, types of organizations that you don't work as well in. People spend a lot of time, big, small, a startup environment, a hands-on environment, right? What are the environments, types of industries that you even want to be in? So the time, if you can, is really helpful. It's a gift.
So, if you've done this inner work, Susan, what do you coach your clients in terms of their first step in shaping a purposeful new beginning of their next work chapter?
So, to your point, we've done the inner work about what gives them purpose, what we envision, how they would feel at the end of a day in their new job, right? Not so much everything they do, but how they would feel. Would they feel energized? What would the connection? So we try and just do some envisioning and see how that lands in their body. Then as they go out, if they can do informational interviews, set up virtual coffee chats, anything like that, where it's a gathering of information and, if you will, a little bit of a treasure hunt, I find that can be really helpful because people do want to help. I am constantly impressed as I have people develop like who they know, who may know someone, who may know someone who's willing to spend 15 minutes on a Zoom or in person on coffee talking about what it's like to work in this industry. People like to share what they know. They like to connect people. That can be really energizing. And one, it can help you practice talking about the kind of role you're looking for if it's going to be slightly different. Two, it allows you to start envisioning what that's like. You've put away the, if you will, you've processed the grief and shock, and you're really talking about the future you and what you can bring to an organization, and people are helping you find that right fit.
Susan, one of the things that the job seeker may discover in their reflection is that it's time to pivot. They were an accountant for 15 years, and what they really have always wanted to be was an art critic. What do you see in successes and failures in terms of that executive who is going to pivot in industry, size and scope, role and responsibility?
Absolutely. I see that a lot. That is a common trait with the clients I work with. Where I have them start is if a person has the time and life stage that, yes, they really are done, if you will, with the previous profession. If they have the time, the first thing in the pivot I want to look at is volunteer or part-time. I'm going to play with your art example here. So a person's been an accountant and they have a little bit of time. What are the local museums, local classes at community colleges, state university, whatever they have? What are the resources to exploring that which lights them up? Now, it may not end up being a full profession, but it's surely showing a need that they want to explore. So we'll start to go down a path working with them of how do you explore that desire? And it can be several things, right? There could be a volunteer component, maybe an online course component, attending lectures. If finances are an issue, we talk about how to use the skill they have in a less restrictive way, meaning maybe part-time, maybe on a consulting, to see if making this pivot. If finances aren't the key driver, then we would focus a lot of the time on exploring it. I'm currently working with a client. They have a job, but they know in a few years they're going to be moving to a different location and really want to switch into a different space. So I've been working with them to explore board opportunities in the industry that they're going to want to work in. But I think board opportunities, volunteer opportunities, any education you can do are really great ways to start to build skills in a different area. And with the amount of, different groups, even meetup groups. I think that's a great way to network and very exciting. And it gives my clients who've done it, they get such an energy boost and they learn like, what do I actually like about this? Is this lighting me up? So I love it when someone is actually wanting to make a pivot like that.
And let's look at the flip side of that, Susan. What have you seen not work effectively for that person who wants to pivot? What takes them down a path that is not going to be successful?
Honestly, it's expectations. I think one of the challenges at certain stages of life, say we have a professional with 15 to 20 years of work and they are our work experience and they're leaving. So they're used to a level of mastery. They have forgotten what it feels like to be a beginner, which is normal. Right? Once we learn something and we become competent, it feels like just water we're swimming in. We're unaware of it. Where real frustration and discouragement can set in is if people expect to take to this new thing at the same level they were working at before with a level of competence. For adults, it can be really challenging past a certain age to feel incompetent, to not know what you're doing, to be in a stage where you make mistakes. And so I really work with people who've been successful, right? Success is terrific, but it can be a handcuff, if you will, when you pivot because you're used to the success and your ego has to really work through what it's like to be a beginner and to not know. So we work through feelings of imposter syndrome. We work through feelings of I'll never learn this. It's too much. I do a lot of work with what is the smallest possible step you can take. Small step versus I'm going to be able to switch over and perform and have knowledge at this same level. So we work on a lot of curiosity, a lot of self-acceptance, a lot of resetting of expectations.
You're an advocate of art journaling. Can you describe to our listeners what that means? And I have to tell you, as a left brain recovering accountant that I am, that sounds really fairy dust like. How is that going to help me?
So I love what you said about the left brain, because we all have two sides of our brain. Our society, current Western society, has us using our left brain in most cases much more. Art journaling is very simple. It's not even fairy dust. If you've ever worked with a client to journal, to write out their feelings, to capture, it's cathartic. It is, it helps people get in touch. It helps them get out of their thought loops. So you're not making art to hang on a wall. You're not going to show it to anyone. It's small pieces of paper, and maybe you're spending 10 minutes drawing a picture, doing a collage. What it does is it shoots you over to that right side of your brain, which is much more holistic and integrated. You know, happiest people are using both sides of their brain. So you almost have to think of it as like weight training for the weak side, and art moves us very quickly there. So there's no expectation. Once again, you're not showing anyone, you can throw it away. But when we play with art, it can be crayons, you can use what you love to use as a kid. It moves you to that right side of the brain, which just piques curiosity enough that if you want to make a pivot in your career, and I'll tell you, this is where I really work with clients to just play with it. It helps you in the pivot. It helps you in the need to reimagine yourself because you're doing something new. You are allowing yourself to just be curious. And it's a small step. Once again, you don't show it to anyone. So, although I actually love the fact that you said it sounds like fairy dust, because in many ways, moving to that side of our brain can feel magical. I've taught entire workshops where people will come up to me afterwards and are like, that was so fun. I have so much energy. And then, so it's not woo woo in that sense. It is our brain getting out of the rut. You joked about being an accountant in that you get deep grooves from doing the same thing over and over and over again. And it just takes you to that right side for a little bit.
One of the things that I remember when I went through a layoff was that my self worth, my confidence, even my ability to be out there with people and do things was rocked. All of those things were very difficult for me to remember that I had, especially when so much of my own personal identity was tied up in what I was doing. How do you help someone rebuild those emotions, those characteristics?
Yeah. So that is 100%. I feel like it's a universal experience. I really do. It's slightly different for each of us, but that horrible, crushing feeling. One of the things I like to do is first work with the person to just capture all those feelings, get them written down. It's amazing what writing something down on a sticky note and throwing it away can feel. There's a lot of exercises that have to do with physically doing something versus just letting the thoughts ruminate in your mind. I then like to just spend some time interviewing my client and having them tell me about times they've overcome. I think as adults, we forget how resilient we've been. We can forget how many challenges we faced. So I like to do a little interview where we talk about challenges that a person's faced. It can start in childhood or professionally. And we start to create, if you will, a little snapshot of how resilient the client is. Because there's things that we forget. We tend to focus, we've got this negativity bias biologically in our brains because it's kept us safe all these years, but it doesn't serve us at certain times. And so I really try and build with the person I'm working from, if you will, a resilience document of all of the times they have overcome and what they have done and contributed to the world in life stages. And that starts to become the I've seen this before. I can do this. This is not as crushing. It's a setback, yes, but it starts to reframe that self-talk, and it helps the client to really start to move forward. Because when you go out in the world looking for a new job and you're internally feeling scared, distraught, less than, that sort of can carry over. And a false bravado doesn't work. So I really try and do the work and find the examples in a person's life that just need to be remembered and refelt.
Susan, you've reinvented yourself a number of times. What have you learned from your own transition that you now pass on to others?
Yeah, for me, and I pass this on all the time. It's a short saying, but it still trips me up routinely. As I've moved through career transitions, physical transitions, moving abroad, several large career transitions, like entire industries, I really work with myself to remember, and I've said this earlier, that I am not in this new phase, even in the first couple of years of a new career, at the same level of competence, of, if you will, connection, regard, of people recognizing what I can do. And it's just harder and harder. It's interesting as we move through life to get used to what it feels like to be a beginner again and to learn. So I like sometimes to try and learn something. So I really remind myself that this is not the first day. I coach people in all sorts of transitions, not just those who've been laid off job. I also do a lot of coaching of executives who find themselves in a C-suite. And the other thing I remind themselves when they will say, I feel like I don't know anything. I feel fraudulent. The person before me, if it had been a planned succession, knew how to do this. I'll say, well, that person had been doing it for 8 years, for 5 years, for 10 years. You're expecting yourself to know how to do something that the person before you took 8 years. And so I think it's that inner critic, that voice. And this is why I like art journaling, because it really helps with the inner critic, is our own worst enemy. And it continues to be mine. And I have all these tools. I just see it when it comes up. And I really try and work with what are realistic expectations for me at this life stage.
Susan, one of the objectives of my podcast is to help people find their next great opportunity easier and faster. I want them to be able to take the things that we talked about and implement them Monday to help move them along. If you were to coach someone on what's the one or two things that they can do this next Monday to be more effective in finding that job, what would you tell them to do?
So I would say, not knowing where they are, but if they haven't done this, I'm just going to take a flyer and pretend they haven't done it. I would quickly do a brainstorm. They can set a timer. They can do this in 20 minutes if they want. So I would give them a 20-minute exercise and I would have them write down everything they liked about the last job and be as specific as possible. The way the windows were set, or being able to work remote, or write everything from physical location to energy to all of that. 10 minutes of that, everything you liked. 10 minutes of everything you didn't. If they haven't already sort of created that bucket, and it's just like and maybe dislikes. What that will do is it will then help them on that Monday be just a little bit clearer about what they are looking for. They're going to keep looking at that like section, or they're going to take that like section and build it into their life right now while they're looking for a job. If there were things like every day I walked from here to there and I liked getting outside at 10 a.m. because the meeting was there, I would get really granular. And if there's things you could put out there, that would be great.
Susan, thank you so much for spending time with us today. I hope that today's conversation with Susan Henley fired each of you up and gave you the push to take the bold steps in your own career. You don't have to face the challenges alone. Together, we can turn uncertainty into momentum and momentum into results. This really is your time to lean in, to get clear on what you want, and to go after it with confidence. Let's start building that future you've been dreaming about. Your next chapter is waiting. So let's make it happen. Thank you, Susan, for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Bob. It's been great.